E nesse mesmo formulário também está disponível algumas perguntas para a gente escutar de vocês, o que acharam do evento, como foi, e para a gente continuar sempre melhorando. Não esqueça, então, de acessar esse link que vai estar disponível no chat no final do evento. Muito bem, então eu vou apresentar brevemente as nossas palestrantes de hoje. E aqui a gente tem a Claire e a Lucia, a Claire Pedrick MCC e a Lucia MCC também. Elas vão compartilhar hoje o tópico de como grandes coaches se transformam a si mesmos primeiro. E é um pouco sobre por que a arte do coaching não é sobre fazer mais ou melhor, e sim ser mais humano. A Claire trabalha com uma lente sistêmica, ela escreveu já o livro Simplifying Coaching, é supervisora de coaching e mentora de coaches, é sócia fundadora da 3D Coaching e vê o coaching como uma parte importante do desenvolvimento de pessoas e organizações em todo o mundo. Lucia é a terceira MCC, Master Certified Coach, no mundo para o espaço Agile e mentora coach, com milhares de horas de coaching, dirigindo empresas de treinamento de treinadores, né, de treinamento de coaches com alcance global. Ela fala em conferências internacionais. Então, eu passo a palavra para elas, que vão seguir com o nosso conteúdo de hoje.
So, Claire and Lucia, over to you.
Thank you so much for having us in International Coaching Week. It's an absolute pleasure to be here. And we're really excited because we sent the manuscript for The Human Behind the Coach to the publisher about an hour ago. So you are the first people in the world that we've spoken to about it, which is super exciting. So why do we think the human behind the coach is such an important thing? 3 years ago, Lucia and I were doing some work together, and I said this would make a great book. And the book was called, I can't remember what it was called. What was it called, Lucia? Growing
To Mastery.
Growing into Mastery. But that was what the book was called, Growing into Mastery. It was going to be a really good book, and it was going to tell you all about the things that you needed to do to be able to move from PCC to MCC. And then it's not called Growing into Mastery anymore, because what we realized as we were writing was that the technical skill is the same at PCC and MCC, but it's the art of how we use it that is the difference. So it's how we are that makes the difference as we go from PCC to MCC, more than what we do. So for us, really outstanding coaching is about 10% technical skill and about 90% humanity. So the difference between PCC and MCC is about the human side of us and how we turn up in the room and how we have a conversation human to human between two people. So you'll know, if you've read Simplifying Coaching, that my definition of coaching is, well, two things. One, it's a conversation between two people where one of us facilitates the thinking of the other. And it's a conversation where somebody feels seen and heard and gets new insights into their own stuff. But for that to be true, there are lots of things that we need to do inside of ourselves differently in order to be able to really fully work in partnership with the other person. So the only time that you read mastery in the new book is when we say that we're not going to use the word anymore, because we much prefer the idea of artful coaching, because it's about the art, it's about how we engage with people. So Lucia is going to tell you a bit about some of the things that we think change on the inside for us to become artful coaches. Then I'm going to do a 10-minute coaching demo with Marcia, who's disappeared. Oh, and then, but she'll be back by then. And then I'll pick up and talk to you about what this artful coaching actually looks like in the room. And we will give you a few tips, a few tiny tips on things that you can do differently as you move towards really artful coaching. Over to you, Lucia.
Thank you so much. Bom dia, good morning, everyone. And so I'm going to talk to you about some of the qualities that we explored in the book. And these are the human qualities we need to cultivate if we want to become artful coaches. And they came up really in our conversations when they were talking about mastery, as Claire shared. So the first of them we talked about was silence. And it's interesting because thousands of books have been written about coaching, coaching questions, coaching models, but no one has written anything about silence. And silence is where the real work happens, is the prerequisite to any transformation. And during silence, we have insights, we move forward. And so transformation can only happen in silence. But there's another dimension to silence. It's not just the silence in the space between us. It's also the silence within our heads. So silence doesn't just mean we're not making a sound when we're listening to a thinker. It also means we're being silent on the inside. So our mind chatters, our ideas, our opinions have a lower volume, because as we enter into the room, we can observe and notice what is happening to the other person instead of listening to our own inner clamoring. And so many people we have met in our careers, many coaches have feel really uncomfortable with silence, and this attitude can really change depending on the culture. So silence might mean we're stuck, like, oh, I don't know what to do, I don't have the next question to ask, and so it can be freezing. But there's also generative silence, and the attitude to silence, the perception of silence of the thinker and the coach can be really different during a coaching conversation. I'm going to share a little story about this. It comes from many years ago, but it's when my attitude to silence shifted. I was coaching a lady. She was a person that used to go in really long and deep silences during her coaching. She was being my client. And so we had a coaching session that was extremely slow. And so my perception at the end of it was that I was barely talking, because she was in really, really long silences. At the end of it, she said, oh, this was really, really hard. And I said, what was hard about it? Well, it was a question after the other. And so it was fascinating to me, because the perception I had and the perception she had about silence were so different, because she was busy and I wasn't. I was there for her. I was observing, I was listening. And so for those of you when we look at Claire demoing coaching and coaching someone else who volunteered, those of you who want to focus on silence today, please notice how long silences will be. Okay, and then I'll give you more about other qualities. So the other qualities I'd like to talk to you about is about control. Is what we call control. And why control is important? Because during our coaching educations, we've learned a lot of tools, techniques, models, perfect questions. And my perception is that all of that is about trying to be in control of something we can't predict at all. And so we just don't know how the conversation is going to go, right? So, and if we focus too much on the skills, we constantly look at our toolbox. Yeah, we have right next to us. We're not really there. And we're taking responsibility for the outcome instead of trusting that we can figure it out together. This is what coach and supervisor Beatrice Dornick calls efforting. And it's when we start to work harder than the client, because we are so much focused on, what's the next tool I need to use here to get unstuck? Or what's the next question I need to ask, that we're not really partnering and co-creating with the other person. I'm going to share another little story about how I developed my not controlling muscle. And it was through a complete life change. About 10 years ago, I moved to a foreign country with my family. And our English at the time wasn't so great. And my husband said, do you realize we'll always be foreigners from now on? And so I thought, yeah, I think so. But I didn't really know what it meant until a few years later. So a couple of years on, we were still talking about our next move, because we knew our home in the new country wasn't the final one. Yeah, we wanted to go somewhere else. And so for a while, we continued to talk about where we should move next, until we realized it was something we couldn't control. We couldn't plan our next moves because life would have taken us wherever. And it was okay, because we decided to embrace a life that was focused on freedom. We valued freedom over settling somewhere. And so the moment we let go of being in control is when we can really, even in coaching, we can really embrace being there, being present, and being fully in partnership with the other person. Another one that is very close to my heart is humility. So humility, why is humility important in coaching? No one talks about humility in coaching. It's because outside of coaching, in our lives, our society pushes us to be competitive, to achieve more and more certification, higher performance, being successful. All of that is about winning. Yeah, in our lives, we strive to win for ourselves. Even on social media, it's all about being successful, looking cool, beautiful. And what happens when we enter the coaching room? Oh, that's horrible, in a coaching room. In the coaching room, we're not there to win. We're there to help someone else win. And so we had a couple of insights from 2 books we read in the past, Claire and I. The one is called Detox Your Ego by Steven Sylvester. And in his research, he interviewed top-level sportsmen, and the majority of them said they reached new level of performance when they stopped focusing on winning for themselves and they started to focus on winning for a greater purpose. It could have been their family, their team, their nation, if they were playing in a national team. The other interesting insight came from Ben Zander in his book, The Art of Possibility. Ben Zander is an orchestra conductor, and what he said is that the orchestra conductor can be easily seduced by the public's attention instead of measuring his effectiveness based on how much he can enable his musicians to do great work. Isn't this what coaching is about? This is so fascinating. We are not there to cross the finish line. We're there to help someone else do it. And so humility is such an important quality we need in the room. So when we go in a demo with Claire, for those of you who want to focus on humility, notice how Claire demonstrates humility. So what makes her questions or interventions humble? Another one we talked about is vulnerability. And, we were quite inspired by the lifelong research on vulnerability by Brené Brown. Brené Brown said, vulnerability is the last thing I want you to see in me, but it's the first thing I want to see in you. And in the coaching room, we have people that share really vulnerable story, stuff that they haven't mentioned to anyone else. And so how can we invite vulnerability in them if we're not willing to be vulnerable ourselves? And we can be vulnerable in coaching in very different ways. For example, when we say, I don't know, I feel stuck now. What shall we do next? You see how much we're not taking responsibility for this, and we are sort of sharing this with the other person because we're not perfect. Perfection is not something that exists. There is no such a perfect thing like perfect conversation or perfect flow or the perfect question we want to ask. We found that beginner coaches really struggle with vulnerability because you really need to get to a sort of a minimum of grounded confidence, your hardcore, where you feel competent enough that you can handle any possible situation. And so you don't need, your self-talk is less loud when it's not perfect. And so once we reach that grounded confidence, we can become kinder to ourselves, and we can be really focusing on being human in the room instead of trying to be perfect, which is never going to happen. So for those of you who will focus on vulnerability, pay attention to what the coach will do when the conversation gets a little bit stuck. Okay, I'll recap those focus points at the end. So another one I'd like to talk about is distance, and this is actually my favorite one because it's also one I developed in my private life. So during the COVID, at the beginning of the COVID pandemic, my husband started to do oil painting, and he's quite a gifted artist. And so what I noticed when he was painting was that he was painting with the arm like this, with this brush in his hand and a really long distance from the canvas. And I found that quite interesting. I asked him, why are you doing that? You're too far from the canvas. And he said, no, come here, look closer. And when I looked closer, the beautiful, it was a flower. The beautiful flower looked actually quite a few meaningless spots of color. But if I looked at it from the distance, it was a beautiful flower. And he said, that's the maximum distance I can keep from the canvas because it's the distance that allows me to have an overall picture of what is happening, of what I'm drawing. And now we found some great analogies with coaching about this. And I'm going to mention only two. You'll find more in the book if you'd like to. One is distance from the story. So when our client starts to share their story at the beginning of the session, there will be a massive download of information. Some of them talk quite a lot, and I know this resonates with a lot of you. They can talk for 20 minutes, without us making a sound. And if we are too close to their story, we might get stuck into the detail, even start exploring something that is not really useful for their goal for today. If we keep at the right distance, so a bit further away from the story, we can really see the bigger themes that are emerging, maybe some areas that we need to focus on, or some bigger themes coming up from their story. Even emotions. If we are too close to their emotions, we're at risk of over-empathizing, or maybe even getting emotional, or, feeling what they feel too much and get stuck with them. Or if we are too far, they might feel dismissed. They might feel we're not really understanding what they're going through. So there's always a balance between being too close and being too far. And there will be different aspects that we will go deeper on in the book. We don't really have a lot of time today. So for those of you who will focus on distance, think about how the coach will keep the right distance from the thinker's story and from their emotions. I'm going to share about a last one. And it's actually the last quality we talk about in the book, because it requires a lot of the previous ones. We called the chapter Insight and Courage because we really feel that they go together and they really need to be there for both the thinker and the coach. So imagine a conversation where the thinker doesn't have the courage to do the work. That conversation will probably stay at the surface level. They won't go too deep. It will be transactional maybe. If we don't have the courage to challenge, the conversation is going to be very cozy, right? Probably they won't make much forward move. There won't be much forward movement. And so there has to be a right balance. And there will always be a moment in a coaching session where we have to choose between comfort and courage, right? And that's the moment where we have to manage our own fears. And there might be many of them, depending on, where we are in our journey of self-development and, working on ourselves. We might be afraid to be wrong. Imagine when we're about to share an observation, but we might be afraid it's not the right time. We might be afraid it doesn't land well. We might be afraid we break trust. And so all those fears stop us from having the courage to share an insight. We also talk about how we offer an insight, because there will be an insight from us and an insight from the client. So if it's happening to them, we'll probably see something that in the book we described as dissonance. So something changes. The light bulb moment, the moment we wait for the whole session. or maybe there's a new energy, there's a new tone of voice. They start, with making gestures with hands, or they move their body in a different way. They go faster when they talk. So we notice something different. But we might also get insight when we look at resonance. So what is always the same across sessions? Imagine thinking patterns, behavioral patterns, people who procrastinate, or words that keep coming back again and again. And so I think it's also important the way we offer that insight, because if it's there inside, we can just notice, right? Oh, something has changed. What's happening? If it's our insight, we'd like to think about it as an offer, because the moment we make an offer, it's their turn to make meaning out of what we see, hear, or sense. If we do the work for them, then it's going to be our learning, and it might not stick. It might not lead to a greater transformation as in the first case. Claire, I'll pass the ball back. Oh, sorry, I haven't talked about. So for those of you who will focus on insight and courage during the demo, think about how the coach challenged. So I'll recap them all so that when we start the coaching demo, you know exactly what to look for depending on what you want to focus on in your reflection. So for those of you who will look at silence, how long is silence? Yeah, what is the longest you can spot? For those of you who will notice control, who is doing the work? Is it Claire or the thinker? For those of you who will focus on humility, notice how it's demonstrated in Claire's questions or interventions. For those of you who will focus on vulnerability, what does the coach do when the conversation gets a bit stuck? For those of you who look at distance, what does Claire do that indicates she's at the right distance from the client's story or the client's emotions? And for those of you who focus on courage and insight, how is she challenging the thinker? Over to you, Claire. Thank you.
Thank you. So what I'm going to do in a moment is I will have a conversation with Marcia to facilitate her to do some good thinking. So what Lucia's talked about so far is the shifts, is the changes that happen inside us as we have coaching conversations with other people. So look for the thing that you want to look for your learning in the demo. And I know this is being translated, but when we come out of the demo, I'm going to talk about the sound and the look of coaching. So you might want to simply look for the thing you've chosen in what we're doing, even if you don't understand the language or it's unclear to you. Just simply watch and see what you learn from watching. And then when we come back together, we will talk about what artful coaching looks like and what it sounds like and what it feels like. So Marcia, welcome.
Okay.
Hello. Thank
Hello.
you. Thank you for volunteering. So we have 10 beautiful minutes. What's the question that you'd like to think about, Marcia?
Yeah. So I'm having difficulties to prioritize a very important project. Yeah.
That sounds heavy.
Yeah. It's,
yeah.
Yeah, because it's important. And I've been wanting to do so for quite a long time.
Okay.
Yeah, and haven't been finding the time or prioritizing it properly.
So it sounds like you've thought about it a lot too.
Yeah.
So in the time we have right now, which bit of this question do we need to be thinking about together?
why can't I manage to find the time to do it, to focus on the project?
So what's stopping you?
Yeah.
Focus, okay. So what would you like to be different in 7 minutes time, Marcia?
That I can try something new.
Okay. And how will you know that it's new?
Because I know what I have already tried.
Okay, so it'll be new.
New, yeah.
So what's the best way for us to do this so that we get us into new thinking and don't go back where you've gone before?
Something comes up to me that is how to move from planning to doing, you know?
So we need to be here, right? In doing?
In doing, yeah.
Okay. So where should we start getting you to doing from learning?
How? I'm thinking about accountability.
I also notice you're thinking a lot.
Yeah.
And we're moving to doing.
Yeah, but I'm thinking.
Yeah. Are you
Yeah.
okay to stand up?
Yeah.
So, how do we do doing right here, right now?
Maybe going to the hand. Going to the hands.
Okay. What are your hands telling you?
That they don't know what to do.
Okay. So in the 5 minutes we've got right now, what do we need to do so your hands do know what to do?
That's a good question. I should listen to them. I should listen to them. Maybe start doing something right now.
Start doing something right now.
Yeah.
And?
So I have a pen, so I grab the pen. That's something I know, an action.
And now?
And now I think I'll write a word. Yeah. So I'm writing the name of the project and then moving my hands. With it, to it, for it. Yeah. So it's writing. So what's coming up for me right now, it's like writing writing or doing something at least 5 minutes. 5 minutes.
How does that feel?
Feels possible.
It feels possible.
Yeah.
So, Marcia, we've got a couple of minutes left. What do
Mhm.
we need to do right now?
I think visualizing the end of all this writing and doing would help.
Go on then, you visualize.
Mhm. Yeah,
And now?
it was good. Now it's enough, I think.
So have we done what we need to do?
Yeah.
Thank
And
you. Are
it's
you clear?
new. And it's
It's
new.
new. Well done. So you've got enough new to take away.
Yeah. Thank you.
Fabulous.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much.
Have we finished?
Yeah, thanks.
Good. Thank you. Well, thank you so much, Marcia, for volunteering. Can I just invite everyone for just a moment to think about what you were looking for in those qualities that Lucia talked about earlier: silence, humility, vulnerability, distance, and courage. And just notice what you noticed, just for a moment. Oh, thank you. Some nice comments in the chat. So the first part of the book is about the shifts that we need to make inside to be able to work in partnership and to be able to do artful coaching. And now what I want to do is just talk to you about some of the things that we see or hear or sense in the space in between us that enables us to really move towards artful coaching. And I think there's a few words that really stick out for me in the ICF competencies and stick out for us. And one of them is partnership. And partnership is one of the things that looks different for artful coaching, or in the ICF language, MCC, from PCC. So partnership is, I never lead, I always follow. Just a little bit close behind. We never lead, we always follow. There's something about never making a decision in the conversation without asking. There's something about working out at the beginning of the conversation what we're doing. The ICF call that establishing the coaching agreement, but we find that that's a bit confusing because the coaching agreement covers the logistical side of the relationship, but it also covers what we're doing in the conversation today. So if you've read Simplifying Coaching, you'll know that in that book it's described as right sizing. So I hope you notice that Marcia and I were right sizing the work at the beginning. So we were working out what to do. I hope you also noticed that I never told her we only had 10 minutes, but I did tell her that we had 10 minutes. So I was being really positive about time, and it didn't surprise me that we finished early, about 30 seconds early. But what we were doing was working in partnership all the way through. And every time I didn't know what to do, what did I do? I asked her. So if we're going to work in partnership, the one thing that you can start doing straight away, right now, is to check in. We can't stay in partnership through the whole conversation unless we keep checking in all the way through. And many coaches that we listen to will check in with a version of, am I being helpful? If you watch back the video, you'll notice that my check-in questions to Marcia were, how are we doing? Where are we? What do we need to do now? I hope. They weren't, am I any good today? So the checking in questions all the way through that are the only thing that keep us in partnership are about the work we're doing. How are we doing? What do we need to do now? How do we finish? And notice that even in the visualization, who led? Marcia did. So she said, I want to visualize it. I don't know how to facilitate Marcia to visualize. And I didn't get her to do it because we had 10 minutes. I got her to do it because she will do it better than I can. So my job is simply to let her do that. So there's something about partnership. There's also something, I think, in terms of what happens in the space between us, about what we see, what we hear, and what we sense. So that's about the dance of coaching, the visual thing. It's about the sound of coaching. And it's about the felt sense that we have, the feelings that we have in the space between us. And Marcia, you were fabulous to coach. And the reason for that was that you were really easy to watch. So it was really easy to watch you thinking. So my job is to do absolutely nothing apart from stay with you while you're busy. And you were busy a lot. So therefore, all I need to do is to watch, 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 and see your beautiful thinking unfold. And that's artful coaching. And it's hard not to get tangled up in the other person's story, but it's also an absolutely beautiful thing to watch somebody do some really, really good work. So the dance of coaching and what we see is really, really important and really useful. So there's something about partnership. There's something about what we see, the dance. There's also something about what we hear, the sound of coaching. So there's a whole chapter in the book about the music of coaching. But one of the things that we notice works really well is that we need to offer our questions to the thinker, because they don't need to take them up. They can change and make a better question, but we need to make an offer. We say, here's a question. Would you like to answer it? Or would you like to choose a better one? And that offer is heard in the sound. So I don't know what that sounds like in Portuguese. I know what it sounds like in English. Lucia knows what it sounds like in Italian. You'll need to think about what it sounds like in Portuguese. But one of the things that started us out writing the book was wondering, what was it that made the difference between a really brilliant, perfect transcript, that when you listen to the recording, you might see a perfect transcript and listen to the recording and go, that is really outstanding coaching. But you might read a transcript and listen to the recording and go, it looks amazing, but it's not working. It sounds odd, strange. They're not in flow. And often that's caused because coaches ask questions that sound like statements. So it looks like a question, but when you say it, it sounds like a statement. So instead of the person who you're coaching thinking it's an offer, they actually think you're telling them something. And when they think you're telling them something, they'll follow you. And when they follow you, you're leading and they're following, and that's not partnership. So thinking about the sound of coaching is a really important thing as we develop our coaching skill. And we have we have some good time this afternoon, this morning, this evening, wherever you are in the world, to just have a tiny little look at it. But I think we want to tell you this book's taken nearly 3 years to write. So we are only giving you a kind of tiny amount of insight, and not so much that it's a bit overwhelming. So there's something about the sound. The other thing that we noticed about 5 weeks ago, I seem to have a habit of getting the best insight for the book just before it goes to print. But we were in conversation, Lucia and I, about how, well, certainly in English, we talk about questions and answers. So you ask a question, the other person answers. You have a little think, then you ask another question and they answer. That's not artful coaching, and it doesn't enable us to get in the dance, because it means we keep stopping to think of the next question, or we ask a good question that we have in our pocket. Really artful coaching, we think, and we're testing this out because I'm not sure we've said this anywhere, have we, Lucia? So let's see what you think. I don't know if I'm glad I can't read the comments when they're in Portuguese. So actually, a much better version of coaching is if you say, answer question, because that keeps us in partnership. So I'm having a conversation with Marcia, she gives an answer, and then I offer back a question in response to her answer, not a question that I've made up and just brought in from the outside. And that's what keeps us in flow, that's what keeps us in partnership, and that's what artful coaching looks like. And then there's also something about trust and our felt sense of partnership. One of the things that I'm going to hand back to Lucia in a minute, because she'll have picked up more than I did from the demo, and she'll be able to just talk some of that through with you. But what I want to say is, what we want to say is, it's completely amazing to do reflective practice where you write in a journal at the end of the session what you think you did well and what you think you could do differently. But you can only remember what you can remember. And if you want to become a really artful coach, you need to watch videos and listen to audios of your self-coaching, because that's the only way to know what you actually did. So I've spoken before in Simplifying Coaching about coaching is about what you see and hear and sense. But what we realized when we were writing, it's about what you see and hear and sense in them, but it's also about what they see and hear and sense in you. And you don't know what that is unless you watch videos and get a bit of a sense of that. But please don't overanalyze. So there's a whole chapter in the book about how to watch videos. And we are really aware that it will freak you out for some of you. It's just a horrible thing. And you go, I don't like the sound of my voice. I don't like watching myself on video. And there are some very gentle ways of getting in to looking and listening and noticing. And the first one, if you want to take away, is record the next coaching session you are able to record. Record it gallery view so that there's you and the thinker. And when you watch it back, take something and cover yourself up. And only watch back the thinker. And you have 2 questions to ask yourself. Number 1, are they thinking? Number 2, when I spoke, were they ready for me? That will deepen your skill of partnership and slightly freak you less than analysing the entire recording through the lens of every single ICF competency, which will completely freak you out and make you never want to do it again. So just a tiny bit will really help you do some good work. So I'm aware you need a couple of minutes at the end, ICF Brazil, to do some business, but we've got a few minutes. Lucia, over to you.
Thank you. So to close this talk, I would invite people who are observing the demo and noticing the partnership between Claire and Marcia to share in the chat some example of how they partnered. This could be questions or other things. So what are some examples of partnership? What are the questions that indicated partnership? What do we need to do right now? What question? Yeah. Where are we now? Yeah. We even started in partnership. What's the question we need to answer today? She reproduced her gesture. Absolutely. What else?
The gestures, I probably reproduced them more than was necessary because I was reproducing them when Marcia wasn't looking.
Where should we start? Beautiful. Thank you. What do we need to do? Yes. I noted a few as well, but I don't want to say before you do. Which bit do we work on together? Yes.
Which bit, however that's translated into your language, which bit is a real amazing, useful question? Because it makes the work the right size. So every time they say, I want to think about world peace now, you can say, which bit? Today.
There was another question that hasn't been mentioned. In the 5 minutes we have, what do we need to do? And there were at least a couple of, and now, which means I'm passing the ball to Marcia for her to decide what we need to do. And even the closing, how we done? Was in partnership. She could have said, no, I need something else. Okay. So Claire shared our LinkedIn profiles, and I'm going to share them again. And the link to the book, for those of you who want to pre-order, would love to stay in touch. And thanks for being here with us today. Thank you.
That's a great question. What do we do so your hands know what to do? I was just following Marcia. She told me. So you don't need to read any books about body language or anything. I was just doing exactly what Marcia was doing. And when she picked something up, I don't know, it just felt important that I should also pick something up. It was totally useless and I didn't need it at all, but I might have. So therefore it was useful to have done it. And I think Marcia probably didn't notice. So thank you, Marcia, for volunteering. That was really useful.
Thank you, everyone. Obrigada.
Muito obrigada, Claire. Sorry.
Back to you, Helena.
I was getting it back already. So, então, Claire, muito obrigada. Lucia também, muito obrigada pelo valiosíssimo insight que vocês trouxeram aqui sobre essa jornada de maestria e arte do coaching. Eu aqui anotei várias coisas e estou super curiosa para quando sair esse livro. Para vocês que estão requisitando os CCUs, então, e o formulário, a Raquel já compartilhou o link no chat. É só preencher e depois vocês vão receber isso pelo e-mail. E muito obrigada. Esperamos vocês nos próximos eventos aqui da ICW Brasil. Teremos aí hoje ainda mais alguns eventos e amanhã. E um super, super obrigado de novo para a Claire e para a Lucia. E para a Francesca, que também participou aqui, ajudou, a Raquel e a Márcia, que fizeram esse evento super possível. Se alguém quiser dizer mais alguma coisa.
Everyone, have a lovely day, a lovely evening, a lovely morning, wherever you are. Thank you so much, Claire and Lucia, for that.
Thank you for having us.
Our pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
All right. Bye-bye.
Tchau, tchau. Muito obrigada.